I believed marriage meant partnership and fairness. I believed hard work would be noticed. I believed love protected dreams, not buried them. That belief ended the day I learned the truth about where our money went and why my future was never part of his plans. What followed changed how I see family, loyalty, and worth forever. If you're watching this, please like the video, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from, because this story is for every woman who was told to stay small while others were lifted using her sacrifice. I thought my marriage was simple, and for many years, that belief helped me sleep at night. We were not rich in the way people brag about, but we paid our bills on time, kept food on the table, and lived what I believed was a decent, honest life. I woke up early every morning, packed lunches, cleaned the house, and made sure dinner was ready no matter how tired I felt. I worked because that was what responsible people did, and I never complained because I believed effort would eventually be noticed. I thought fairness existed inside family walls, especially inside a marriage built over decades. My days followed a quiet rhythm. I worked shifts that kept the lights on, sometimes double shifts when money felt tight. I came home smelling of grease and coffee, washed my hands, and sat down across from my husband, believing we were equals, sharing a life. I never asked him where every dollar went. I trusted him. Trust felt natural when you share a bed, a last name, and years of history. I believed respect lived quietly in the space between routine and loyalty. There were moments I dreamed bigger, moments I imagined going back to school or doing something more than surviving from paycheck to paycheck. But each time those thoughts surfaced, I pushed them down gently, like smoothing wrinkles out of a tablecloth. I told myself it was too late, that I should be grateful for stability, that not everyone needed ambition. I believed sacrifice was love, and patience was proof of maturity. I convinced myself that choosing peace over desire made me a better wife. My husband often praised practicality. He liked things simple and predictable. When I talked about ideas or hopes, he reminded me how risky dreams could be, how important it was to stay grounded. I listened. I believed he was protecting us, protecting me. When he said working at a diner was good enough, I accepted it as wisdom, not limitation. I told myself there was dignity in honest work, and that ambition was overrated. I believed partnership meant trusting the person who spoke louder and seemed more certain. Family gatherings were part of that calm illusion. Dinners were polite, laughter came easily, and no one raised their voice. My sister was always the bright one, the one with confidence and big plans. I didn't resent her. I told myself there was room for different paths in one family. When people praised her, I smiled and clapped, believing support was what good sisters did. I never compared us, at least not out loud. I believed comparison only bred bitterness. Looking back, the signs were there, hiding in plain sight. The way money conversations always ended quickly, the way certain decisions were made without me, the way my questions were brushed off with reassurance instead of answers. But at the time, I mistook silence for harmony. I believed that if nothing felt loud or angry, then everything must be fine. I told myself that love didn't need explanations. I took pride in being dependable. I thought being low maintenance made me valuable. I believed that not asking for much meant I was easy to love. I wore that belief like a badge of honor, even when it meant shrinking parts of myself. I didn't realize that silence was not neutral. It was a currency, and I was paying with my future. That was the calm before everything broke open. I had no idea that while I was choosing patience, decisions were being made without me. I had no idea that my trust was being used as permission. I truly believed that fairness existed simply because I believed in it. I didn't know silence was already costing me everything. It happened during what should have been an ordinary family dinner, the kind I had attended hundreds of times without a second thought. The table was full, the food was warm, and the room carried that familiar noise of forks, glasses, and small talk. Nothing about the evening warned me that my life was about to split into a before and an after. I sat in my usual place, listening more than I spoke, comfortable in the role I had trained myself to play for years. I believed I was safe there, surrounded by family, sharing a meal that felt routine and harmless. My sister was in a cheerful mood that night, talking more than usual, enjoying the attention as everyone listened to her stories. She spoke about her plans with confidence, about law school, about her future, about how everything seemed to be lining up perfectly for her. People nodded, smiled, congratulated her. I did too. I had always done that. Supporting her felt natural, almost automatic, because that was how our family worked. One shined, the other stayed steady in the background. I told myself there was nothing wrong with that balance. Then I noticed my husband. He was watching her with a kind of pride I had never seen directed at me. It wasn't loud or obvious, but it was there in his posture, in the way he leaned forward slightly, in the way he smiled before she even finished a sentence. That smile made something inside me tighten. It wasn't jealousy, it was recognition. I realized that smile had never been meant for me, and somehow I had learned not to expect it. The conversation drifted to money in the casual way families sometimes allow, joking about tuition, expenses, and sacrifices. My sister laughed and made a comment about how lucky she was to have support. She said it lightly, as if it were nothing, as if everyone at the table already knew. That was when she mentioned help from family, help that went far beyond encouragement or advice. Her tone was relaxed, careless, the way people speak when they believe there are no secrets left in the room. I looked at my husband then, really looked at him, and saw something change. His face stiffened for just a moment, so quick that anyone else might have missed it. He didn't speak. He didn't laugh. He paused. That pause felt louder than any confession. It stretched across the table and landed directly in my chest. In that silence, I understood that something important had been hidden from me, something large enough to require silence rather than explanation. The room kept moving around me. Glasses clinked. Someone reached for bread. Another person changed the subject, sensing discomfort but not understanding it. I sat there, frozen in place, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. I told myself I was tired, that I was reading too much into a moment that meant nothing, but deep down, I knew better. That pause had weight. It carried intention. It carried history. As the dinner continued, my sister kept talking about her plans, about how hard law school would be, about the opportunities it would open. My husband nodded along, offering encouragement, asking questions, sounding invested in a way that felt unfamiliar. Each word added pressure to the realization forming inside me. This wasn't new. This wasn't spontaneous generosity. This was something planned, something decided without me. I felt strangely calm as the truth began to surface. Not peaceful, but steady, like the moment before a storm fully breaks. I watched them interact, noticing details I had ignored for years. The confidence in her voice, the comfort in his responses, the assumption that I would simply accept whatever reality existed, whether I knew about it or not. In that moment, I understood my place at that table. I was not a partner in decisions. I was an audience. No one explained anything to me that night. No one needed to. The silence did all the explaining. I smiled when expected, nodded when spoken to, and finished my meal like everything was normal. But inside, something shifted permanently. I realized that fairness was not absent by accident. It was withheld by choice. And that dinner, so ordinary on the surface, became the moment everything cracked beyond repair. It happened so quietly that no one else seemed to notice it at first. My sister laughed and made a passing remark about how she would never have managed law school without help, the kind of comment people toss out without thinking. She spoke as if it were common knowledge, as if everyone at the table already understood the full story. She mentioned money casually, not an amount, not a detail, just enough to reveal that her path had been smoothed in ways mine never was. The words floated in the air for a moment before settling heavily in my mind. I turned toward my husband, expecting him to correct her or change the subject. Instead, he froze. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was a pause that lasted only a few seconds, but those seconds stretched longer than anything I had felt before. His hand stopped moving. His expression tightened. His eyes dropped to his plate. That silence told me more than a confession ever could. In that pause, I saw the truth clearly for the first time, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. No one spoke right away. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else laughed nervously and tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground. But the damage was already done. My heart started to race, not from shock, but from recognition. I understood that this wasn't a misunderstanding or a poor choice of words. This was a secret that had slipped out accidentally, one that had been carefully kept from me for a long time. My husband's silence confirmed it. If there had been nothing to hide, he would have spoken. He always did. I replayed the moment again and again in my mind, watching his reaction from every angle. The way his shoulders stiffened. The way he avoided my eyes. The way he chose silence over honesty. That was when I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about decisions made without me, about futures planned behind my back, about value assigned quietly and firmly. In those 3 seconds of silence, my marriage shifted from something I trusted into something I needed to question. I stayed quiet. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't ask for explanations. Part of me wanted to, but another part knew it wouldn't help. I had learned over the years that the truth doesn't always come when you ask for it. Sometimes it reveals itself when people think you're not paying attention, and I had been paying attention my whole life, even when no one thought I mattered enough to notice. As the dinner went on, my sister continued talking, unaware of the weight of what she had revealed. She spoke freely, confidently, believing her success was deserved and supported as it should be. No one challenged her. No one questioned the fairness of it. I looked around the table and saw nods, smiles, approval. And suddenly, the years of quiet disappointment I had carried began to make sense. This wasn't favoritism that grew over time. It had been there all along, shaping choices, guiding resources, deciding who was worth investing in. I thought back to all the times I had asked for small things and been told no. The courses I wanted to finish, the ideas I had shared and been dismissed, the times I was told to be realistic, to be practical, to not reach for more than what I had. Those words had never been about protecting me. They were about limiting me. And now, sitting at that table, I understood why. Resources weren't scarce. Support wasn't impossible. It simply wasn't meant for me. My husband finally spoke again, changing the subject as if nothing had happened. His voice sounded normal, too normal. That, more than anything, confirmed my fear. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't embarrassed. He was managing the situation, smoothing it over, protecting a decision he had already justified to himself. In that moment, I saw him clearly, not as the man I married, but as the man who had decided my worth long before that dinner. I smiled politely and continued eating, but something inside me had already shut down. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't even sad. I felt clear in a way I had never felt before. The slip had exposed more than money. It exposed how little my voice mattered in my own life. And once that truth surfaced, it demanded to be answered. Not with words, not with arguments, but with action. After that dinner, my mind kept drifting backward, pulling memories forward that I had packed away for years. I remembered every time I had brought up the idea of doing more with my life, only to be gently, firmly pushed back into place. I remembered how I once talked about finishing my education, how my eyes lit up at the thought of learning again, of proving something to myself. I remembered sitting at our kitchen table, hopeful, nervous, explaining my plans in a careful voice so I wouldn't sound demanding, and I remembered how quickly that hope was shut down. He told me to be realistic. He said dreams were nice, but bills were real. He said someone needed to keep things stable, to be dependable, to not take risks. He told me I was better suited for practical work. Something simple, something that didn't require ambition. A diner job, flexible hours, no pressure, no big expectations. At the time, he made it sound like advice given out of love, like protection. I believed him because I trusted him, and because I had already learned that pushing too hard only led to silence or disappointment. What hurts now is not just that he discouraged me, it's that he discouraged me while secretly doing the opposite for someone else. While I was being told to lower my expectations, to shrink my dreams, to stay in my lane, $500,000 was being handed over to make sure my sister could rise. While I was counting tips and wiping tables, she was being prepared for courtrooms and careers. And all of it happened without my knowledge, without my consent, without even the decency of honesty. I thought about the years I worked double shifts, coming home exhausted, hands aching, feet swollen, telling myself it was temporary. I told myself I was contributing, that I was helping our household, that sacrifice was part of marriage. I never complained about the long hours or the missed opportunities. I told myself love meant compromise. I told myself loyalty meant endurance. And he let me believe that, knowing full well that resources existed for dreams, just not mine. I remembered the nights I came home late, smelling of grease and coffee, collapsing into bed while he slept peacefully. I remembered waking up early to do it all again. I remembered how proud I was to bring home even a small paycheck, how I told myself it was enough because I was doing my part. No one ever told me I deserved more. No one ever told me my dreams mattered, and slowly, without realizing it, I began telling myself those same lies. What makes the betrayal deeper is how carefully it was hidden. There were no signs, no obvious changes in lifestyle, no sudden wealth. Everything was done quietly, deliberately, as if he knew that secrecy was necessary. He knew I would question it. He knew I would be hurt. So instead of trusting me with the truth, he chose to erase me from the decision altogether. That wasn't protection. That was control. I also remembered how often my sister was praised for her ambition, how her confidence was celebrated while mine was called unrealistic. I remembered family gatherings where her future was discussed openly, enthusiastically, while my work was mentioned briefly, politely, as if it were something to be endured rather than admired. I accepted it then because I didn't know better. I thought this was just how families worked. One child rose, the other supported. Looking back now, I see the pattern clearly. I wasn't discouraged because the money didn't exist. I was discouraged because someone had decided I wasn't worth the investment. Someone had decided my role was to maintain, not to grow, to serve, not to lead. And that decision was reinforced every time I chose silence over confrontation, gratitude over resentment. That flashback didn't fill me with anger the way I expected. It filled me with understanding. I finally understood why something inside me had always felt unfinished, why I carried a quiet regret I couldn't name, why watching others succeed sometimes felt like grief instead of inspiration. It wasn't jealousy. It was loss. Loss of a future I was told not to want. In that moment of reflection, sitting alone with memories I had avoided for years, I realized something important. My past wasn't defined by my limitations. It was defined by other people's choices. And once I understood that, the shame I had carried for so long began to loosen its grip. I hadn't failed. I had been held back. And now that I could finally see it, I knew I didn't owe anyone my silence anymore. After the truth slipped out at that dinner, I couldn't unsee it. Every small moment that followed felt sharper, clearer, like a fog had lifted from my life. I started paying attention to things I had once ignored, the way my husband avoided my eyes when money came up, the way my sister spoke with confidence that didn't come from talent alone, but from knowing she was backed, protected, funded. And most of all, the way they both acted as if nothing had been taken from me at all. I didn't explode. I didn't cry in front of them. I stayed calm, almost too calm, because something inside me was quietly gathering pieces. I asked simple questions, careful questions, questions any wife had the right to ask. I asked when the money had been given. I asked why I was never told. I asked why my future was treated as optional while hers was treated as an investment. None of those questions were answered directly. Instead, I got smiles, tight smiles, defensive smiles, smiles meant to shut things down. My sister leaned back in her chair and smiled in a way that made my stomach turn. It wasn't warm, it wasn't kind, it was confident. She told me I should be practical. She said not everyone was meant for big careers. She said some people were happier keeping life simple. She said it like advice, but it landed like judgment. And my husband sat there silently, letting her speak for him, letting her dismiss me in my own home. That was when suspicion turned into certainty. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a secret kept to protect me. This was a choice, a decision made over time, discussed, agreed upon, and hidden. They didn't forget to tell me. They decided not to. And that decision told me exactly where I stood. I watched my husband's face as my sister spoke. He didn't interrupt her. He didn't correct her. He didn't defend me. He nodded slightly, almost without realizing it, as if her words aligned perfectly with his own beliefs. That small movement, that quiet agreement, hurt more than any insult could have. It confirmed that what I was hearing wasn't new to him. It was familiar, comfortable, settled. I started replaying old conversations in my mind. Times when he told me not to apply for programs. Times when he said we couldn't afford risks. Times when he encouraged me to stay where I was because it was safe. Back then, I thought he was being responsible. Now I understood he was being selective. He believed in investing, just not in me. The more I thought about it, the clearer everything became. The sacrifices I made were never seen as sacrifices. They were seen as my role, my duty, something expected, not appreciated. And because I fulfilled that role quietly, without complaint, it became easier for them to assume I would accept anything, including being pushed aside. What hurt most was realizing how long this had been happening without my awareness, years of decisions made without me, years of futures planned that didn't include my growth, years where my effort supported a system that didn't value me equally. That kind of betrayal doesn't explode. It settles. It sinks deep. It rewrites how you see your entire life. I noticed how relaxed my sister was, how secure she felt speaking down to me. That confidence didn't come from confidence alone. It came from knowing she had already won. She had the education, the funding, the approval, and she knew I had none of those things. She knew the balance of power, and she enjoyed it. That smirk wasn't just arrogance, it was proof. My husband finally spoke, but not to apologize. He told me I was overreacting. He said the past was the past. He said I should focus on what I had, not what I missed. Those words sealed everything for me. Because people who respect you don't tell you to forget what hurt you. They don't ask you to minimize your loss so they can stay comfortable. In that moment, I stopped seeing them as people I needed to convince. I stopped hoping for understanding. I stopped waiting for validation. Suspicion turned into resolve. I didn't need more proof. I had seen enough. Their words, their silence, their expressions had told me the full story. And while they thought I was shrinking under the weight of it all, something else was happening. I was stepping back, observing, learning. Because once you see how people truly see you, you also see clearly what you need to do next. That night, after everyone left and the house went quiet, I finally faced my husband. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I sat at the kitchen table where I had cooked thousands of meals and waited until he stopped pretending nothing had happened. The air felt heavy, like it does before a storm. I asked him, calmly and clearly, to explain why my sister's future mattered more than mine. I asked why a decision that changed our lives forever was made without me. I asked why he thought it was acceptable to shape my limits while expanding hers. He tried to keep it simple. He said it was practical. He said someone had to keep the household steady. He said my sister had potential that needed support. He spoke like this was obvious, like the answer should satisfy me. But the more he explained, the more I understood that this was not about money alone. It was about belief. He believed in her. He did not believe in me. And he had been comfortable with that belief for years. I reminded him of the nights I worked late shifts, the mornings I woke early to pack lunches, the times I skipped doctor visits so bills could be paid. I reminded him of the years I asked for patience, not permission, to finish what I started. I reminded him that I never asked for handouts, only fairness. He listened, but his face stayed distant, like he was watching a story that didn't belong to him. He said I was strong and didn't need help. He said I handled things better than most people. He said he thought I was content. Those words landed harder than anger. They told me he had confused my endurance for satisfaction. He had mistaken my silence for agreement. He had used my strength as an excuse to deny me opportunity. In his mind, my ability to cope made me less deserving. I felt something break quietly inside me, not loudly, not dramatically. It was the kind of break that happens when a truth finally settles. I realized that this conversation was not a turning point for him. It was a confirmation for me. I was not misunderstood. I was known and still dismissed. He knew what he was doing. He simply believed I would accept it. I asked him one last thing. I asked if he would make the same choice again, knowing how it affected me. He did not answer right away. When he finally spoke, he talked about timing and circumstances and how life forced hard decisions. He never said he was wrong. He never said he would choose differently. That silence answered everything. In that moment, love changed shape. It did not vanish, but it lost its safety. I saw our marriage clearly for the first time. It was built on my sacrifice and his comfort. It depended on me staying small so others could grow. And it worked only as long as I believed that was normal. Once I stopped believing that, the foundation cracked. I stood up from the table and felt surprisingly steady. I told him I needed space, not to punish him, but to think clearly. He looked shocked, as if the idea that I might step away had never crossed his mind. That reaction confirmed what I already knew. He did not expect resistance. He expected endurance. That night, I slept in the guest room and stared at the ceiling for hours. I thought about the years ahead if nothing changed. I thought about waking up every day knowing my potential had been traded away without my consent. I thought about what it would cost to stay. And for the first time, I asked myself a different question. Not what I owed my marriage, but what I owed myself. By morning, my decision was quiet but firm. I did not announce it. I did not threaten or beg. I simply understood that this relationship could not be repaired by apologies that were never offered. Love cannot survive where respect is absent, and respect cannot grow where one person is always asked to be less. That confrontation did not end my marriage in one night, but it ended my hope that things would change on their own. It ended my habit of waiting. It marked the moment I chose myself, even if no one else did. And from that point on, everything I did was guided by a single truth I could no longer ignore. I deserved more than being tolerated. I deserved to be believed in. I did not leave with a suitcase or a speech. I did not announce plans or explain myself to anyone. I stayed calm on the outside while making careful choices on the inside. I understood that loud exits invite arguments, and arguments drain strength. I needed my strength. I needed clarity. So I moved quietly, step by step, like someone rebuilding a life without asking for permission. I kept working the diner job he once told me was all I was good for. I showed up early. I stayed late. I saved every extra dollar I could. I learned how to stretch money, how to plan months ahead, how to live smaller without feeling small. I stopped waiting for approval and started relying on discipline. Each shift became part of a larger plan, even if no one else could see it yet. At night, when the house was quiet, I studied. I borrowed books. I used free courses. I practiced skills I once believed were out of reach. I reminded myself that learning does not expire with age. I had been told for years that it was too late, that the moment had passed, that my role was already decided. I decided not to believe that anymore. I treated my mind like something worth investing in. I did not share my progress with my husband or my sister. I learned the value of privacy. I learned that not everyone deserves access to your rebuilding. Silence became my shield. While they assumed I had accepted my place, I was laying new ground under my feet. Every quiet evening became proof that change does not need witnesses to be real. I rebuilt my confidence slowly, not through praise, but through results. When I solved problems on my own, when I learned something new, when I completed tasks that once scared me, I felt stronger. That strength was different from endurance. Endurance is surviving. Strength is choosing direction. For the first time in years, my direction belonged to me. I also rebuilt my sense of worth. I stopped measuring myself by how useful I was to others. I stopped apologizing for needing rest. I stopped explaining my choices. I understood that being underestimated can be an advantage. People stop watching. They stop interfering. They stop expecting anything from you. And in that quiet space, growth happens faster. Over time, my marriage faded into something distant, not angry, not dramatic, just empty. We lived separate lives under the same roof for a while, then fully apart. I did not chase closure. I did not demand understanding. I accepted that some people only value you when you fit their plans. Once you stop fitting, they call it change. I called it freedom. I built a routine that supported me: work, study, rest, repeat. I set small goals and reached them. Then I set bigger ones. I kept records. I tracked progress. I learned how to manage money with intention. I opened accounts in my own name. I took control of decisions that had once been made for me. Each responsible choice felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. There were lonely nights. I will not pretend otherwise. Starting over often is. But loneliness did not scare me the way dependence once did. I preferred quiet evenings to crowded rooms where I was invisible. I preferred effort to comfort that came with conditions. I learned to trust my own judgment again. Years passed without announcements, without updates, without applause. They assumed I had settled into the life they predicted for me. They assumed I stayed where they left me. That assumption worked in my favor. While they moved on, distracted by their own choices, I kept building. By the time they remembered me, I was no longer the woman they dismissed. I had skills. I had stability. I had confidence that came from doing the work alone. I had proof that their judgment had been wrong. Not because I argued with it, but because I outgrew it. Choosing myself did not happen in one bold moment. It happened in hundreds of quiet ones. Every night I studied instead of doubting. Every shift I worked instead of complaining. Every boundary I kept instead of explaining. That was my counterattack. Not revenge, not noise, just steady progress in a direction they never thought I could go. And when the time came for them to notice, I did not need to say anything. The life I built spoke clearly enough. 5 years passed quietly. Not the kind of years people post about or celebrate out loud. These were working years, learning years, healing years. The kind of years where nothing looks impressive from the outside, but everything changes on the inside. I did not mark anniversaries. I did not count losses anymore. I counted progress. I counted stability. I counted how many nights I went to sleep without feeling small. By the 5th year, my life no longer looked anything like the one they remembered. I lived in a modest but peaceful place that was mine. I paid my bills without fear. I made decisions without asking permission. I had built something steady, something quiet, something real. I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. I had already proven it to myself. Then one afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I knew before opening it that life was about to circle back. Some part of me had been ready for this moment for a long time, even if I never spoke it out loud. When I opened the door, I saw faces that looked older, heavier, worn down by choices they once made confidently. My sister stood there first, the golden one, the one who had been funded, praised, protected. Her posture was different now. Her confidence was gone. The certainty she once carried had been replaced by strain. Behind her stood my former husband, thinner, quieter, avoiding my eyes. They looked at me like they were seeing a stranger. They expected bitterness. They expected anger. They expected someone still hurt. What they did not expect was calm. What they did not expect was control. What they did not expect was that I was no longer waiting for anything from them. They came inside slowly, unsure of where to stand, unsure of how to speak. The balance of power had shifted, and they felt it immediately. The room did not belong to them. The conversation did not belong to them. I did not belong to them anymore. That is when the truth came out. My sister was drowning in debt. Law school had cost more than she ever planned for. Her job was not what she imagined. The prestige did not come with peace. The money did not last. The pressure never stopped. The help she once relied on was gone. My former husband had lost everything he thought made him important. Poor investments, bad decisions, pride. He spoke carefully now, like someone who had learned that words have consequences. The man who once told me I was only good enough for a diner job could barely hold his own life together. They did not say it directly, but it was clear why they were there. They needed help. They needed stability. They needed the woman they once dismissed. They looked around my home, noticing details, the order, the calm, the proof of a life handled with intention. Their expressions changed when they realized this was not luck. This was built, slowly, without them. That was the power shift, not a dramatic reveal, not a raised voice, just the quiet understanding that the roles had reversed. I was no longer the one being judged. I was the one being evaluated for mercy. They spoke about the past carefully, like stepping around broken glass. They tried apology, they tried explanation, they tried regret, but none of it landed the way they expected, not because I was cruel, but because I was done carrying their weight. I listened. I always listen. But listening does not mean agreeing. Listening does not mean reopening doors that were closed for good reasons. I understood their fear. I understood their panic. I even understood their shame. But understanding does not require sacrifice. They asked for support. They asked for help. They asked for another chance. And in that moment, I saw the truth clearly. They did not come because they missed me. They came because they needed me. The same way they once decided who was worth the investment. The same way they once decided I was not. The difference was, this time, the decision was mine. I did not raise my voice. I did not list their wrongs. I did not replay old pain. I simply spoke from a place they had never seen me stand before, a place of self-respect. I told them I wished them well. I told them I hoped they figured things out, and I told them I would not be part of fixing what they broke while stepping on me. The silence that followed was heavy. They finally understood. The woman they underestimated was gone. In her place stood someone they could not control, guilt, or use. When they left, I did not feel victory. I felt closure. 5 years earlier, they believed my future was small. That belief shaped their choices. Now they were standing in the result of those choices, and I was standing in mine. The moment I finished speaking, something shifted in the room. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was the quiet collapse of expectations they carried with them when they knocked on my door. They had come believing time would soften everything. They believed distance would erase memory. They believed struggle would earn them sympathy. What they did not expect was that I had already done my grieving years ago. My sister's face tightened first. The confidence she once wore so easily was gone. She looked around my home again, slower this time, as if searching for proof that I did not deserve this stability. When she realized there was none, her shoulders dropped. The truth settled in. The investment they all believed was guaranteed had failed. The one they dismissed had survived without them. My former husband shifted in his chair, unable to sit still. This was a man who once spoke with authority, who made decisions without discussion, who labeled worth as if it were his right. Now he weighed every movement carefully. He understood something too late. Control only lasts as long as dependence exists, and I was no longer dependent on anyone. They began explaining themselves in ways that exposed more than they intended. My sister talked about pressure, about expectations, about how hard it was to live up to the image everyone had built around her. My former husband spoke about stress, about bad timing, about choices that seemed right then. None of it sounded like accountability. It sounded like fear of consequences. What struck me most was not what they said, but what they never said. They did not speak about the years I struggled. They did not mention the nights I worked late. They did not acknowledge the dreams I was told to shrink. They did not recognize the damage of being told I was only fit for less. Their concern was focused forward, not backward, on survival, not responsibility. That told me everything I needed to know. They were not there to repair a relationship. They were there to secure support. They were not seeking forgiveness. They were seeking relief. The roles had reversed, and suddenly empathy was expected from the person who received none. I did not argue. I did not challenge their stories. I did not need to. Their behavior exposed them more clearly than any accusation ever could. When people face loss, they show who they truly are, and in that moment, they showed me that nothing had changed except their circumstances. I explained my decision calmly. I told them I had rebuilt my life without help, without shortcuts, and without taking from anyone else. I told them that the strength I gained came from standing alone, and I would not trade that strength for guilt-driven obligation. I told them that my peace was not something I was willing to gamble again. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. They were not used to being denied, especially not by me. My sister's frustration slipped through next. Not anger, but disbelief. She had lived her life believing safety would always be provided, that someone else would step in. Watching that assumption fail was harder for her than the debt itself. She realized in that moment that being favored did not prepare her for reality. It shielded her from it. My former husband looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but emotionally. He understood now that his judgment had been wrong, not just unkind, but incorrect. The woman he labeled as limited had surpassed him in resilience. The one he dismissed had become the strongest person in the room. They asked again, softer this time, not directly. They hinted. They hoped. They waited for me to change my mind. I did not, because consequences are not punishment, they are lessons, and lessons lose meaning when they are undone too easily. I stood, signaling the conversation was over. I wished them clarity. I wished them growth. And I wished them the strength to face the lives they built through their own choices. When they left, there was no satisfaction in watching them go. only a deep sense of certainty. I had not been cruel. I had been fair. For the first time in my life, fairness included me. Their true character had been exposed not by success, but by failure. And my true character had been shaped not by opportunity, but by endurance. That was the real consequence. After they left, I stood alone in the quiet of my home and felt something I had not felt in many years. It was not anger. It was not victory. It was relief. The kind of relief that comes when you finally stop waiting for people to become who they were supposed to be. I realized that night that healing does not arrive with apologies. It arrives with acceptance. For a long time, I believed healing meant being understood. I thought one day my husband would admit he was wrong. I thought my sister would recognize what she was given and what I was denied. I thought there would be a moment where everything balanced out emotionally. That moment never came. And once I stopped waiting for it, I became free. I began to understand that my life did not restart when they walked out. It had restarted years earlier when I chose to leave quietly and rebuild without explaining myself. Every long night of work, every lonely meal, every doubt I pushed through had already healed me piece by piece. I just had not noticed it happening. I no longer measure my worth by what others invest in me. I learned that people often fund what flatters them, not what is fair. My sister was funded because she fit a story they wanted to tell. I was dismissed because I asked for nothing and endured everything. That was never a reflection of my ability. It was a reflection of their fear. Today, my life is simple and steady. I wake up without anxiety. I work without shame. I rest without guilt. I no longer explain my choices or defend my past. I do not chase approval. I do not compete with anyone. I am finally living without shrinking myself to make others comfortable. The most important healing came when I stopped seeing myself as the one who lost. I did not lose time. I did not lose opportunity. I gained strength that cannot be handed to someone else with a check. I gained discipline. I gained clarity. I gained a sense of self that does not depend on praise or permission. I also learned something difficult but necessary. Love without respect becomes control. Support without fairness becomes power. And silence, when forced on someone, is not peace. It is suppression. I lived too many years believing quiet endurance was noble. Now I know boundaries are. There is a lesson I carry forward, and I share it with other women who feel unseen. Being underestimated is not a curse. It is protection. It gives you space to grow without interference. It allows you to build quietly while others assume you cannot. The people who look past you are often the ones who would have held you back. I do not hate my sister. I do not hate my former husband. Hate requires energy I no longer waste. I see them clearly now, and that clarity is enough. They made choices based on comfort and image. I made choices based on survival and self-respect. Those paths do not end in the same place. If there is one truth I hold on to, it is this. No one gets to decide your limits for you. Not a spouse, not a family, not a system that rewards some while silencing others. The moment you stop accepting a role you did not choose, your life begins to change. I was told I was only good enough for less. I was told to stay practical. I was told not to dream. And because I listened for a while, I learned exactly what those words were worth. Nothing. The woman they dismissed became the woman they needed. And by then, I no longer needed them. That is the quiet power of healing. It does not announce itself. It does not seek validation. It simply stands firm, rooted in truth. And the moral I live by now is simple. Never let anyone else decide the size of your life, especially the ones who benefit from keeping it small.